Hi there, I'm Claudia Hosky from Fed Insider, and on behalf of the George Washington University Center for Excellence in Public Leadership and Lumen, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar on taking a holistic approach to cybersecurity. Please type your questions and comments into the Q&A pod. If we don't get to them during today's webinar, we'll share them with our speakers so they can follow up with you. Also take note of the Resources tab on the left side of the screen to download a copy of today's slides and other reading on today's topic. We offer live captioning for all of our webinars. To follow along with us today, use the live captioning or CART tab above the slides. We'll have the full transcript available in the next day or two. And to earn training credit for today's webinar, you'll need to answer all polling questions throughout. And now, let me turn over the reins to today's moderator, Jane Norris from Fed Insider, to kick off today's webinar. Take it away, Jane.
Thanks very much, Claudia. It's great to see you. And thanks, everybody, for joining us today. It's an interesting conversation that we're having today. It's an fact of life that the cyber threat landscape is constantly adapting, evolving, and expanding. More devices are looking to connect to government systems, especially as workers keep working from home or transition to splitting their time between remote and office sites. This has created a new vulnerability, the burnout of cybersecurity professionals. They are getting stretched thin, trying to keep up with new mandates, reporting requirements, complex frameworks, threat alerts from many sources, both within and outside government, and voluminous security alerts from the IT and software systems themselves. All this as it gets harder to compete for talent and budgets are squeezed. Today, our thought leaders in government and industry will map out how the cyber threat landscape is changing and discuss their thoughts on best practices for using automation and integrated security solutions to ease the burden on their cybersecurity staff. But before we begin the discussion, I'd like to introduce our esteemed speakers and learn more about their work and background. So please meet our first speaker, Jeffrey Lush. Jeffrey is the Chief Information Officer for Air University, U.S. Air Force. Jeff, welcome. Please tell us about your background and the work you're doing at Air University.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So Air University I still believe, the largest university in the world. We serve around 400,000 students, graduate around 150,000 a year. And our primary mission, of course, is to deliver the best air support and space support that we can in the world. So a little bit about my background. I've been doing this just a little over 40 years now in the IT space. I'm the CIO now here, but I've been the CTO for federal groups at Dell and HP, as well as CTO for the Department of Veterans Affairs over my career. So it's been a wonderful ride, and the cyber threat does continue to increase as it has been continually increasing over the past many decades I've been doing this.
Yes, very true, and great industry and defense experience. So we really welcome your input today. Bo Hauser is with us on the civilian side. He's the Chief Information Security Officer, or CISO, at the U.S. Census Bureau. Bo, thanks for joining us. Please tell us about your background and the work you're doing at Census.
Thank you, Jane. Thanks for having me today. Great topic, great panel. At Census, I've been here about 3 years. We're best known for the decennial census, right? We just finished that in 2020, but we're always busy. One of the other things we do that folks don't think about is our economic indicator program. We measure the economy and release those indicators periodically. And that's really important work as an example. But we're transforming from a cybersecurity standpoint. We learned a lot from the 2020 census. That was a great operation, very successful. And so we're taking all those positive lessons learned, and we're working that into our enterprise cybersecurity program. So I hope to share a lot of what we're doing today during this discussion.
It's great. I have followed Census very closely, so you're doing great work, and we'd love to hear more information about how that's going. Also with us today, Martin Nystrom. Martin is Vice President of Product Security at Lumen Technologies. Martin, please tell us about your background and the work you're doing at Lumen.
Thank you. I decided to become a security professional after 9/11. So 20 years ago is when I decided to start this journey, and then quickly found that most of the action was in fighting botnets and chasing down threat actors. And so over the years, I've built out security operations teams, big data platforms, and then SaaS security products. So I've come to Lumen here just a few months ago to build security products on Lumen's amazing platform that really reaches 95% of all enterprises here within the US. And so I'm really excited about public-private partnership and working with my co-speakers here today.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing your backgrounds with all of us. It's going to be a fascinating discussion. So let's get into it. My first question, of course, the cybersecurity landscape that you've all been talking about, it has changed since the executive order on May 12th, 2021, when that was issued. So please tell us about the changes and advancements that Zero Trust architecture has brought to the government and the private sector. Jeff, maybe we can start with you and ask why Zero Trust has become so important for defense and Air Force right now.
Absolutely. So Zero Trust, of course, is kind of like the cloud term, right? It means so many things to so many different people. But today I'm going to focus really on what that means to us at Air University today. The reality is that we don't want multiple systems with administrative level access, multiple people and multiple systems, right? We have to be able to manage who's accessing what system and why they're accessing. And this isn't because necessarily we have malicious staff that are doing bad things. A lot of times Zero Trust is associated with, well, insider threat and those things may exist, but for the most part, I found most people are usually honest and fair. But that threat of having one person have access to multiple systems or multiple people having access to multiple systems at levels where they can do damage to the environment, it's just a threat that we don't need anymore. And so at Air University, we're really working very hard to consolidate all of that level of access. And that's a process that we'll get into more during this webinar today, but there's process associated with that of kind of reducing your risk by reducing the number of people that have that level of access to your systems and develop process and budget in order to do those type of things.
I would just add, Jeff, this is Bo. I just want to kind of tag on and pull that thread a little bit. For me, I think the true power, I agree with what you said, the true power of Zero Trust really comes to bear when we're able to leverage the more tools in our toolbox. And what I mean by that is we can get very granular with the user attributes. We can incorporate more detail around device attributes and even the session attributes. So we can get to the point conceivably to say, to get the access that you're talking about, you got to be the right person, and we got to know that with high confidence. You also have to be on the right device. And if you're not on the right device, right, in the case of a phishing attack where an attacker gets into the environment with authorized credentials, they're not likely going to be coming from the right device, right? So we can stop them and interrupt that kill chain if we incorporate those additional details. And it's very, very flexible, but very sophisticated. But
it does create a little churn for individuals, right? So, yes. Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, what a great world we're living in now that we have the technology that can make those definitions, right? And say, you're the right person, the right device, the right geolocation. There's lots of things that we can double check to make sure that the bad guy isn't inside our walls. So yeah, great. Thanks, Bo.
It's really interesting. And that is an area of microsegmentation, I would think. Yes? All right. I'm getting a head nod. So that might be, I'll take that for a yes. Bo, I want to ask you, what threat intelligence contributes toward your cybersecurity decision-making and helps you build your long-term strategy? And how do you build your base for where you want to go?
Right. Great question. I would say that in cybersecurity, Intel has become the heart. And what I mean by that is we all know defense in depth. It's all near and dear to our heart, but various levels of defenses to make it harder for the adversary to get to the crown jewels. But we've also seen instances where defense in depth falls short, right? And so Intel really brings a whole other aspect to the conversation. At Census, we have a team of cyber intelligence analysts, right? They're not IT people, they're Intel people. And so their role is understand the census business, and we deal a lot with information because of the nature of our business, and then take that knowledge and understand the threat landscape. And we need to look at host nation actors, what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how they're doing it, and also cyber criminals, right? Hacktivists too are in that as well, but what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it. And if we have an actor, for example, say we have a cyber criminal that is targeting bulk PII, obviously that's going to be interesting to the Census Bureau. So we really want to know exactly how they're doing that as an active sort of event happening on the internet. And then we feed that information to our cyber hunters. Our cyber hunters turn that intel into fingerprints and telltale signs of what that looks like within the census environment. That's an exercise, right, that they go through, and then they scour our environment for any signs of that. At the same time, we turn that into proactive monitoring for our security operations center. So we confirm our environment is clean against that specific attack, and we also go proactive going forward. And then we have our penetration testers simulate those attacks, right? So none of that can happen without that intel driving those processes. So again, defense in depth is very important, still very relevant, but the intelligence-driven model is now becoming the lifeblood of modern programs.
It's really fascinating.
And Jane, I would just add to the great work the Census is doing, and lots of federal agencies are doing on this topic that sometimes we may not appreciate as much because the eventual maturity of their efforts come out in different compliance regulations that NIST is publishing, different controls. So it's kind of this never-ending loop where we're getting the feedback immediately and then incorporating that into new standards that we all comply with, hence making all of us a little bit more secure.
I would say, Bo and Jeff, very well done in highlighting how threat intelligence enters into that loop and that cycle, both for detection, for updating your controls, for hunting against those controls, for then updating your policies and making sure that we're continually improving based on that. Well said.
All these new requirements and parameters that Zero Trust has put in place has created a lot of new work for cybersecurity professionals. Could you address the issue of burnout for cybersecurity professionals and potential solutions to keep them engaged?
I will. Thanks, Jane. I would say probably all of us security professionals have missed holidays, birthdays, weekends in dealing with threats and outbreaks. And this is a difficult job. You're usually only blamed for what goes wrong, rarely rewarded for what goes right. And so it's a tough industry. And, now we face this labor shortage where we're trying we're all trying to go after the same talent. And then on top of all that, Threat Connect recently did some research. One of the top 3 reasons employees leave a job is because of burnout. So 27% of those leaving jobs said it was stress, it was burnout, they couldn't handle it. And I think we can identify that with that and understand it. Now, how do we solve it? And I think one of the ways we solve this, I love Jeff's positivity earlier. I'm going to share that positivity. We live in a golden age. We live in a golden age of APIs and cloud services. So we can now talk to products over well-defined, self-defining APIs. We can use that to build automation that can do a number of things for the security operations team in particular. First, it can present a more complete investigation in the hands of that analyst. So they don't have to click and click and click in order to find all the data. They can also move faster. So the data is actually collected and presented to that analyst so they can move a lot faster than they could have when they had to collect it themselves before it all rolls out. They can also be more consistent So the steps are followed by the automation, and we're not dependent on them to remember these 7 steps, especially when they're early in career. And then on top of all that, we can apply machine learning across this data set, and we can discover things in this noise that we might not have otherwise seen. So if we're here to protect a number of things, including data, then moving quickly to catch these threats when they're acting on our data is absolutely critical. So moving fast with consistency, that actually takes these jobs that perhaps at one time might have been a lot of clicking and typing and are now thinking, right? We're respecting the knowledge and education of our staff by presenting a more complete picture to them, automating that workflow so that they can do the job. And we together can protect America's data. We can work in partnership to protect this data. It's extraordinary.
It definitely is extraordinary and a fascinating subject as we continue today. Thank you all for your comments. And let's talk about, if you will, the Zero Trust architecture and how it's impacting agencies and their digital modernization. Digital modernization has been in the works for quite some time. Now with the Zero Trust architecture, it's adding a new focus. So let's start with you, Bo, if we can. How does the Zero Trust architecture work for Census? And can you talk about how you maintain a strong security posture while fulfilling your mission to share data and other information from both internal sources and external sources?
Yeah. I mean, like many organizations, we're wrestling with all these challenges right now. And it is certainly an active conversation for us. I think, to the point earlier about being burnt out and really asking more and more of folks, adding Zero Trust to the plate is just another thing for folks to have to deal with as well. So it kind of gets to the same points you made earlier. But at Census, again, we're trying our best to focus the Zero Trust conversation because there's so many elements. Zero Trust means so many things to so many different people. And so what I've been trying to do is drive the Zero Trust conversation to something a little more precise. Again, there's a lot, but what we're starting with is, back to my point earlier, that attribute-based access control. And so what we want to do is make sure through our identity service that we can leverage the user attributes, as many of those as needed, the device attributes, because identity is also associated with the device now under Zero Trust, and which of those attributes we're going to choose to place our trust in, and then also session attributes, geographic location, or what have you, right? The environment, the cyberspace visibility is extensive, right? We can even tell which internet service provider someone uses, as an example, right? So do we want to, in certain situations where it might be an administrator coming in to do privileged work, how high do we want to make the bar for their access, right? Whereas if it's someone from the general public coming in to complete a survey, it won't be the same level, right? We will not care as much about their device per se as we will when it's an administrator coming in to do privileged activity in the environment. So we're wrestling with these policy sort of aspects, and then it gets to the technology. How do we bring it to life, right? And I do truly think cloud is the key to unlocking this. When I look at the enterprise, the on-prem, the data center, it just hurts my head to think about how we would possibly do Zero Trust in that scenario. So what we're trying to do is combine it with our cloud migration to bring some of these things to life. But it's tough.
And when you say you combine it with your cloud migration, obviously that's been underway for quite a long time, and the Zero Trust security model is more recent. So how do you marry those two?
Well, if you ask some folks, they'll say we've always been doing Zero Trust, and then that's where you get into sort of the real root of the discourse, if you will. And so again, what we're seeing today is some cloud service providers are building their services to be Zero Trust native, if that's a term, right? They're building it to do Zero Trust out of the box, so to speak. And so from that standpoint, I think it is the opportunity for federal agencies to really tap into these capabilities and start using these capabilities But that also requires much more than a lift and shift to get to the cloud. If you've done a lift and shift, you're sort of behind the 8 ball. You really have to use cloud native services and cloud native technologies, SaaS and PaaS, for example, to unlock these capabilities. And so that's really the struggle.
Great.
And Bo, if I could just add to that, I mean, clearly as security professionals, we know what we need to do here to make this right. But we're also, I think, improving the experience for end users who now, for example, we've worked with an agency where by implementing Zero Trust, they can more efficiently update their endpoints by access to Windows Update without going through centralized sites. They have access directly by virtue of the posture on that device. And so we can actually improve the experience of end users and giving them a bit more perceived freedom while increasing the validation of both their identity and their endpoint.
And that's a great point. We can, if the attributes align, we can remove all the friction for the user. So, and you see this when you go to your bank with a new phone or a new laptop, your bank recognizes that it's a new device and it adds rigor to that interaction, right? But if it's the same device, it's a more seamless experience. So yeah, I agree with that. That's a good point.
Great points, everyone. So let's get Jeff in on this conversation. Jeff, a little different for you. The Air Force mission objective for Zero Trust is to achieve freedom of movement for warfighters, giving them the flexibility to operate from anywhere, anytime, no matter what their conditions or their network or location, and still maintain security. So could you discuss some of the capabilities that enable that kind of flexibility?
Absolutely. So absolutely critical to be able to go what we would call downrange at the drop of a hat and be able to still communicate and do the things that we need to do. And a lot of that is done through cloud-based services that give us that flexibility. And I would agree over the last discussion that we've had, implementing stronger cyber controls and using cloud-based services are huge when it comes to removing the workload and making your folks more deployable and more agile. I'm not, look, 10 years ago, I would have been more apprehensive perhaps with the cloud-based technologies. Today, having seen how it affects our budget, how it impacts everything that we do, there is really some great benefits in that type of technology. For example, if we take on an application within the Air University, a single application, for example, we have to secure that application. And that application will start at around $250,000 and go up. So just to provide the penetration, the annual security efforts, all of that, very expensive for us. In a cloud environment, we don't do that. It's all within our boundary, right? And so when we deploy, we build things in that same concept, right? We make sure some things have to be loaded local. I get it, right? Downrange, you don't have access to everything, but we're in a more controlled environment and we can really adjust what's going on that equipment. I think the last thing really on this topic is for all of the decision makers, we have to look at things differently. This is a great opportunity for us to drive down costs. And we need to be able to communicate that so we can get the right investments within the government, especially to make those changes. And I will say the government is leaning forward on this and making those right investments that they need to keep all of our warfighters safe and their equipment and their IT resources secure as well. So we're not sitting waiting. The Air Force is very progressive, as well as the Department of Defense and the U.S. government, to making sure that we're very secure. And I think cloud is a big attribute of that.
So moving to DevOps or DevSecOps, I guess is more appropriate term for this. How has that transition been? The military is a very hierarchical organization. Is it a difficult transition?
You know, it hasn't been. I think I think the reality is that when you and Bo had mentioned this is a combined effort, right? When we transform an environment and really go through digital transformation and start to migrate, what we're seeing is, 95% of what we do can probably be done somewhere else. And so DevOps follows in the same suit. The nice thing, though, about DevOps in today's world is that it's so integrated with cyber that we now have a DevOps environment where we're making decisions in that DevOps environment in a cloud-based environment, cycling it into production, all seamless, and we're getting threat vectors that are impacting our development cycle and exactly how we're deploying and things of that nature, all really quite dynamically. And so it really is actually a new age, and it really is very good for the security of applications within these environments.
It's very exciting to hear. Thank you very much for that explanation. Martin, we'll go to you, and let's talk a little about managed security. And given the lack of talent and resources you talked about earlier in the security fields, what avenues can your organization take on to improve the performance of the Security Operations Center? And can you explain how it operates for those that may not know?
I can. So taking the latter, I really love both what Bo and Jeff said earlier when we talked briefly about that loop, right? So it's detection, it's then taking that detection and it's being able to respond to it. It's then also using that to hunt against those threats, turning those into ultimately control updates and then policies. So we want to create that loop. But day to day in a SOC, it's really personnel who have eyes on glass, who are watching for these threats with a stream of data coming in, usually in some sort of a case system, so that along with the SIEM and perhaps an XDR. And then there's usually some kind of hierarchy, meaning that there are people who are the first to see it, who then will escalate the issue up to those who are more seasoned and are vested with more responsibility to complete an investigation or to take action on behalf of a customer or the enterprise itself. And so to do this, there's no way around it, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, which means you need at least 7 bodies, 7 human beings, and really 12 is more advisable to have leaders and people to handle vacations and off time. And to have that many people in this era of highly selective opportunities for the labor pool that we have is really, really hard. We believe then that working in a public-private partnership and offering, for industries that are offering a SOC as a service, let's say, look, we can work with you either as a co-managed solution or you can outsource to us and handle a different type of work. But we believe that, and we offer a SOC as a service that can provide this. So that I think is key. But I think to do this, there's a couple of things. I said it earlier. Automation. So we want to automate, and we've vested this in our automation. In fact, we've automated 2 full-time employees worth of work in our internal SOC. Thousands of hours of work has been automated. And I think being able to do this allows the SOC to operate where the analysts are putting eyes on real threats, not just the low-level things, but the real threats. And I want to just cite 3 quick examples. So the SOC needs to be able to have the time and the maturity to look at things like the Colonial Pipeline hack, which a year ago, we weren't complaining about prices. We were complaining we couldn't get fuel because the gas lines were so long because of the Colonial Pipeline hack, or the Kronos HR hack that happened at the end of last year where companies couldn't pay their employees. And then we've just seen Black Lotus Labs, our team at Lumen, just published last month the Zuorat hack against Soho routers. And so these Soho routers were actually a means of getting to targeted victims within some of the public sector agencies to be able to look at their traffic. So the SOC needs to have the time, maturity to be able to look at sophisticated threats like this. And that's why automation and personnel are so key.
I think more and more there is a necessity really for industry to work with government, everyone to work together. It's an inevitable fact, and I think that that makes perfect sense. So I'm sure there's a lot of pickup on that, especially now with all these new cybersecurity requirements that are coming down. So thank you for sharing that with us. Let's talk about some of the other requirements that are being really discussed out there. Some of them very difficult to accomplish. For instance, what the military is trying to do. So Jeff, can you explain how Zero Trust helps to enable a resilient network architecture that can federate with joint forces, allies, and partners, and give airmen the ability to maneuver quickly and to connect to data and resources seamlessly across the globe? That is the goal. How do you accomplish that?
Well, we're accomplishing it through a front end that validates everyone, and then based on their need, we can issue them out. So one of the challenges in the past has been that you have primary systems that, let's just say, for example, in Office 365 or Google or whatever you're doing your office automation with, right? Your documents and spreadsheets. And then you may have a specialized application. In our case, it might be an education application, and then maybe a second one that does course delivery. So you have these three primary systems within your environment. Historically, and don't forget Service Desk and all the other systems that from an operational perspective are required in order to maintain a satisfactory experience for the student, we have to have all these different systems. Well, in the past, that meant logging in individually, usually, to all of those systems or getting challenged somehow to those systems. To Martin's point, we've deployed software and automation that allows us to log in at a single point and share that information with all those subsystems. And so when it comes to being able to deploy someone, wherever they are, they can go to a browser securely, hit the logon spot and have access to their resources, and us on the background be able to say, well, they're on a mobile device and they're outside of the continental US. We're not going to allow them to access this type of data on that type of device because it's not uncommon to get those devices picked up, or that country is known for doing attacks on mobile devices. Those type of things. We can adjust all that from a single area and make those adjustments literally on the fly sometimes to accommodate the mission, but maintain the security. And the same thing happens. We have international students that attend the university as well. And so the same level of tenacity, I guess, right, discipline that we have make that possible for all of those groups, regardless of their geolocation.
And giving people access to data that may be outside of your specific network, that's got to be a difficult thing to accomplish. Are we there yet?
We are. There's lots of regulations around it for good reason.
Of course.
But yeah, we're there. We're able to share, but certain information is a no-go. For example, as I think Bo, or maybe it was Martin that mentioned PII data, that's a no-go, right? There's lots of regulation around that, but being able to distribute a course on a specific topic at the university that has no sensitive information, no PII, right? So that becomes a little easier to share with those that are not in our organization or within the U.S. So it really depends. But the key, I think, is that the automation and the software and the security discipline is such that we can segment that now. It's not all or nothing. We can make those decisions and allow those people to have certain levels of access while still keeping everybody else secure.
All right.
And Jane, I can share a pilot we're doing at Census that relates directly to what Jeff's talking about as well.
Great.
We're working with the United Nations actually, and we're working with the statistical organizations from 5 different countries. We're using an open source product called PyGrid, and all of this falls into the privacy enhancing technology domain, right? And so the goal of this pilot is for each participating country to maintain control of their data sets and not disclose the data sets with anyone, but still enable other organizations to submit queries or data science questions or other sort of data science related queries to our data set. We process that query and we return a response to the person while maintaining our data in a confidential manner, right? And so we're in the throes of this pilot now. We're very, very optimistic because I see many, many use cases where organizations want to control their data, that they don't want to share their data, but they still want to empower the data. And so that's what we're working on. I'll keep everyone abreast of the progress we make, but it looks promising so far.
Well, that sounds fascinating. Yes, we'd love to hear more about that. So, Bo, can you also talk about the NIST cybersecurity framework and how you have prioritized your decisions about certain cybersecurity solutions that it recommends?
Yeah, the thing I like most about the cybersecurity framework is that it identifies outcomes, right? NIST 853, the control families are not outcomes. They're controls that we have to figure out how to satisfy. And so being able to shift from a control-driven approach to an outcome-driven approach is key to us, right? And again, I would argue that you can't do risk management starting with controls. That's a compliance mindset, and a compliance mindset really focuses on risk avoidance, where in today, this day and age, it's all about risk management. We know there's risk. How are we going to manage that risk? And so being able to focus on those outcomes, like one outcome, all devices and all software is inventoried. That's easy to deal with, right? It is or it isn't. That's an outcome that we can aim to achieve versus, various controls that sort of play into that. So we're transitioning to an outcome-focused approach to cybersecurity that I think aligns much, much better with risk management. Our pen testers are playing a key role in this as well. So, we can say things like, if you can withstand our pen test, we can assume your controls are effective. I don't have to go control by control by control and collect evidence to support each and every control that is listed. I can say, you did a pen test, access management is hit, data security is hit, right? I can sort of cut to the chase and again, be more operational and more outcome driven versus compliance. So I think it's helping us make that shift.
That's great information. Thanks for sharing that. Really appreciate it. And Martin, can you discuss how the Trusted Internet Connection 3.0 guidance, including cloud, mobile, encrypted applications, environments, all these different standards are impacting federal agencies in their move towards zero trust?
No, first, thanks for spelling out TIC, Trusted Internet Connection. That's useful to always know that we know what it stands for. I love it.
I'm a journalist by trade, so I always try to do that.
I think it's important so we understand what it's all about. And I think it very wisely updates the guidance and recognizes that your location within a network is insufficient to secure your data. Right? So it recognizes that we have to evaluate more than just a network location of something. And so we now say, you know what, we actually need to identify, and I think Bo mentioned it earlier, we need to evaluate the identity and the device itself, and in order to make sure that this is allowed to be on my network, and in fact do so continuously, not just once, but continuously, to ensure that it still should have access to where it is. So we're truly the TIC 3.0 guidance is truly improving the security of these agencies, but it's also providing, as was mentioned earlier, it's also providing much more convenience, because it means that this endpoint does not need to hairpin every connection to every other place on the internet through a single point. It can actually go straight out for traffic that's trusted as long as it meets the device posture. And so I would say I'm very proud to tell you that Lumen has been working on a number of pilots with several agencies, and we were the first to offer TIC 3.0 on EIS. So we do have a solution there, and I think it benefits both the security of the agency as well as the convenience for the end users who now can operate with greater scale.
So that is very important compliance that we're discussing. Let's move on to some issues that are a little more exciting and futuristic, but are already really in development. And that is how the future will roll out with things like AI, robotic process automation, machine learning, and the role that industry and government collaboration plays in making sure that they are working properly and can have explainable results. Bo, if we can start with you, can you talk about how Census evaluates new technologies and how you look to your cyber workforce to provide them with decision support?
Yeah, and again, it's another area where we see cloud as the opportunity. Again, there are cloud service providers that are building AI into their services today, and we get detection alerts that says, this person logged in from this geographic area, and then within 60 minutes, they logged in from across the country. Can't do that. It's impossible. That's an issue, right? So we have these today. So your point about it's already happening, yes, it's already happening. And so I think the challenge for many federal agencies is stop thinking that you have to do it, right? We need to sort of let the pros do what they do and then consume those services and products. And again, it's going to be cloud. So that's what we're prioritizing. I had another thought and it lost me. Sorry.
No worries. It'll come back.
Yeah.
I was just going to add to that, Bo. Maybe I'll prompt your thought there. It's we're moving out of the age of do-it-yourself. We have a very solid set of IT and cyber professionals that do exist in our society today. This isn't 40 years ago where we were all just kind of making things up as we went along. This is actually real solid career fields, and these folks are very, very talented. So those that are listening today that may be more do-it-yourself oriented, you may want to look at having others help you do it yourself, because there's lots of great technology out there and services that end up costing the government less money and being much more effective than we can do in-house.
So to you, Jeff, I was wondering if you could describe, of course, how Air Force enables its talent. You're at Air University. You're teaching young men and women what their roles and backgrounds will be and their future occupations, I'm sure, once they get into the military, into the Air Force. So what do you do to enable their skill sets?
Well, I mean, the military as a whole has a very regimented process for training and educating all military members, certainly to include the Air Force and the Space Force. But, we focus, just like most agencies, on their desire, the airman's desire, and then kind of move it through that gamut. At the Air University, we give them opportunities also to earn master's and PhD degrees and really hone in their specialty where, if you're an officer in the Air Force, Maxwell Air Force Base because you've been to the Air University, because there are certain courses that we teach, as do the sister services to the Air Force, like War College and things of that nature that are very specific. But so we take a lot of those efforts to make sure that they're the best trained in the world.
And do you find that there's great interest in the cybersecurity field? Is that something that young airmen and women are interested in developing in their career path?
No, I'm just joking. Some of them, absolutely. But most people are like everybody else. We hate cybersecurity, right? Because it's a pain in the neck. But people are more patient with cybersecurity, the way we have to deploy it. And I think as a whole, the world is really seeing that, oh yeah, we really need to make sure we're secure, because there's lots of bad people out there that are trying to attack us electronically. So I think we've gotten more tolerant, right? Our users have become more tolerant. And then we have, like the industry, we have very talented people inside DoD that are highly motivated to be cyber professionals. And I would say some of the most trained and efficient cyber professionals exist within the Department of Defense, keeping us safe. It's not the people on our borders as much anymore. It's people on the internet, right? That threaten our way of life. So absolutely, we keep them trained.
It's interesting.
I was going to jump in, Jane. I agree with Jeff. Some of my best cyber practitioners are former DoD and military. I think that comes from that war fighter mentality, because in cyber, we have an adversary, right? None of the other IT disciplines really have an adversary other than users making mistakes. We definitely have an adversary. But at Census, very similar. We also, I'll just give a plug for the Partnership for Public Service. They have what they call the Cyber Talent Initiative. Great program. They work with students doing IT-related degrees, and they bring them into government service, and there's also a private sector element to it. We participate in that. The Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services has the Cyber Vets program, which is really good for veterans. So we do try to support those programs as well.
That's great. And I think that what I hear both of you saying, and Martin, I want you to jump in here, is that there are certain parts of cybersecurity that probably could be automated because they're not very interesting for cyber professionals, or maybe routine, or are too much information that they have to wade through. And it sounds like that there's a role for automation there. So Martin, can you tell us how partners can advance cybersecurity solutions for the government to make it more of a participating sport that people and machines both work to advance?
A couple of things I want to mention here. First, yes, we talk a lot about automation, but one of the most efficient ways to find a threat in an environment is by using threat intelligence. And so we in Black Lotus Labs, as part of Lumen, we work very closely with agencies, including in the JCDC, the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, sharing very sensitive threat intelligence that we are able to observe and hunt on our own network. We actually also every single month, we disrupt as many as 150 botnets. So we're actually taking down threat actors and notifying to make sure that those threat actors are disrupted. So simply on our own platform, and by those agencies that trust their connections to our platform, we're keeping that healthy and clean using the threat intelligence that we hunt ourselves, and in close collaboration with agency partners such as JCDC, as well as NSTAC, CISA Central, NSIE, Defense ISAC. We're working with all of these agencies to share information, with all of these groups to share information, to make sure that we're advising about the threat actors, we're hunting those threat actors, we're disrupting those threat actors, and then we're sharing that threat intelligence back so that threat intelligence can be placed into the security operations hunts, and treat these adversaries as adversaries, really find them and disrupt them. So that's one of the things that we're doing in partnership. And the second thing we're doing, I want to call back to Zero Trust and TIC 3.0. We talked a lot today about identity and about Zero Trust. And when we think of identity, we're thinking of human identity. But there's also a non-person entity that we have to think about as well. And these are machine-to-machine connections that we've probably all lived through SSH worms. And so these disruptive attacks that are using the implicit trust between devices to propagate. We know now that actually part of TIC 3.0 is to make sure that those machine-to-machine communications are secure. In fact, NIST 800-207 calls for that and says that you do have to secure these NPE AI engines. And so we are working to research and collaborate with our agency partners to develop that, to make sure that we have an offering there to ensure that Zero Trust is truly secure.
And can you discuss for a moment the responsibility of partners, contractors, as you work with government agencies? Has that changed since the executive order on Zero Trust?
Well, it has, in the sense that we've been developing our solutions for Zero Trust in understanding those requirements, staying ahead of them, ensuring that there are selectable solutions, such as our TIC 3.0 offers, development of our SOC as a service, our threat hunting capabilities that can then meet the requirements of the executive order. Those are things that we've been developing and have to offer our agency partners while we link arms, right? We view this as a partnership, linking arms against the adversaries to ensure that you are protected, and we as a nation are protected.
There are just in the cybersecurity directive, there are specific requirements for contractors as well as for government and how they protect their systems. So it's really meant to be, I think, a joint initiative. So thank you all. This has been a fascinating conversation. I want to give us a moment just to hear from each of you about what will drive innovation in cybersecurity in the future. So Bo, could we start with you? And can you talk about the level of cooperation that's needed internally in your organization in order to drive innovation into cybersecurity?
Yeah, it's really key. I've seen many organizations where security is the office of no. That usually isn't very helpful. Security has to be an honest broker at the table innovating, and so that is key. The other side of that is under true DevSecOps, you can read this in NIST, security becomes the responsibility of the developer. Every security requirement has to be a line of code, right? The security team is not going to write that code. So the developers have a critical role if we're going to do true DevSecOps. Without that, you're talking secure, agile software development. That's a big difference, right? So the collaboration and the integration is key. Everyone needs to understand the value of threat intelligence. Lately, CISA is honing in on the vulnerabilities that are most exploited, most actively exploited, right? And so it's really helping organizations prioritize all the countless CVEs that we have to deal with or weaknesses, right? And so you're starting to see more of an appreciation that this is critical, and many people have a role here to do this right.
Excellent. And I think that is exactly the right answer. Is that on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being hard, 1 being easy, or maybe the other way around? How hard is that to accomplish?
It's sort of a maturity thing. It's like, what's baby step 1, what's baby step 2, and then how do you increase maturity? I think to the point earlier, everyone's heart's in the right place. Everyone wants to do the right thing, but they know their area and they kind of operate in that silo. And so we got to kind of break down those barriers. But I think once you do that, folks are certainly willing.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Jeff, did you want to jump in?
Well, I was just going to add, there's 2 ways to dig a hole. We can use a spoon or we can use a backhoe. And with cyber, too many of us are still using the spoon. So in order for us to truly advance and move forward in this, we all have to be ready to use the backhoe and kind of break out of what we think is right and kind of move forward with this. Additionally, I think the advancement of cyber for those younger folks on the call that may be looking for more experience, we invite you to join up. Come into the DoD space, either on active duty or as a federal employee, and you'll get more experience you can shake a stick at. and it will absolutely enhance your career and your ability to serve in the future. So we invite you to do that as well.
Great.
If I should, Jeff, I love what Jeff said because he inspires a sense of purpose. And I think, Jeff, I can see it in you and Bo as well, that you have a sense of purpose, that there's a duty here to serve the public, to serve the mission. And Lumen is here, and I'm proud to be part of this conversation because we are serving the mission with you. We want to make sure that we're helping you on the journey to zero trust with our solutions. We've got the staff here to help watch the threats and respond to them, to share threat intelligence, to know what to go hunt down and resolve, and make sure that we're here with you in the journey. So I'm here because I was inspired by the events 20 years ago that made me want to stand up and be part of the solution for our country. And I really love the call that you put out, Jeff, to those that are entering their career to join the mission and be part of the solution.
Did you have final thoughts on what will drive the next phase of innovation in cybersecurity, Mark?
Well, I still think it is automation. And so automation allowing us to not only detect and resolve threats, but actually to present data to the analyst to resolve. And this is the part that I think is exciting, and some would call it scary, that we can use artificial intelligence to detect and respond to these threats, to make sure that we can keep a tight lid on these events and allow our analysts, the intelligent analysts, to put eyes on the real threats, the real adversaries that are using unique attacks to disrupt our infrastructure and to steal our data. So I believe that artificial intelligence, automation, machine learning truly are the future. But the good news is there are going to be plenty of roles for intelligent human beings who want to be part of the mission and look at the advanced attacks of the adversaries.
I love that. And this has been a great conversation. I think it's been very enlightening, and I'm sure the audience has learned a great deal. So thank you all. We really appreciate your time today and all your great insights. And there are more conversations just like this one, and you can check them out at fedinsider.com for all the details. So with that, I want to turn things over to the capable hands of Claudia Hosky, publisher of Fed Insider, to wrap things up for us today. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, Jane. And to our audience, thank you so much for your participation. Training certificates will be emailed after the webinar ends. And remember to log back in the next day or two to download a copy of today's captioning transcript. We have many webinars in the works, as Jane mentioned. So check out fedinsider.com to see what's coming up and to register for multiple webinars at the same time. And while you're there, you can check out our podcast, Feds at the Edge. And with that, this is Fed Insider signing off.